Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've always believed that history should stay buried until it's ready to teach. But sometimes history claws its way back, desperate to be remembered. My name is Russell Keene. I'm a historical archivist for the Nevada Preservation Authority. Mostly, I catalog old government time capsules, military records, and Cold War communications for digitization. Nothing dangerous, nothing even remotely exciting. Until last October, when I was assigned to a recovery team in the Nevada test site, specifically a forgotten installation beneath the long-abandoned Mercury base. Mercury, Nevada. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. It's not on most maps anymore. Founded in 1950 as a support hub for nuclear testing at the Nevada Proving Grounds, it was once a bustling town of scientists, soldiers, and classified operations. But after the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and the reduction of open-air testing, Mercury was shuttered. Now, it's a shell of aluminum trailers, concrete bunkers, and chain-link fences slowly losing the battle to the desert sun. The mission was led by the Department of Energy's Office of Legacy Management. They discovered a sealed vault, marked Project Cyclone, in an old decommissioned bunker complex 2 levels beneath the base's logistics warehouse. My role was to document and safely recover any time-sensitive materials, tapes, documents, film reels. They said it was likely just a Cold War-era propaganda archive. I thought it would be boring. I was wrong. The team consisted of 10 people. I still remember every name. Dr. Olivia Huang, radiochemist and mission lead from Livermore. Marcus Taggart, Army Corps of Engineers liaison. Felix Donahue, radiation safety officer, quirky, always chewing gum. Bethany Carver, DOE security. A couple techs from Sandia, Derek and Joel, handling structural analysis. 2 vault access engineers, both subcontracted from Raytheon. And me, the paper pusher with a clipboard and a Nikon D850 on a lanyard. The entrance was welded shut. It took the Raytheon team over 4 hours to cut through the half-inch steel using a high-temperature plasma torch, all while keeping a HEPA vacuum system on standby in case of particulate release. I stayed behind the containment curtain, photographing everything. When the seal finally broke, a puff of air hissed outward. It smelled stale, dust, ozone, something coppery. Felix immediately ran air quality tests. Oxygen was low but safe. No alpha or beta radiation above background, no airborne toxins. We were cleared to proceed. The vault door was strange, like something you'd see in a submarine. Thick steel with a rotary valve lock and faded yellow biohazard symbols partially painted over with black spray paint. Felix ran a Geiger counter over the threshold and gave the nod. Inside was a narrow corridor descending about 20 feet into the earth at a steep angle. The walls were coated in thick lead paneling. Some of it bubbled from age. Red emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, miraculously still powered by a backup generator that had kicked on when the vault opened. It was colder inside than outside, maybe 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Dust thick as snow blanketed every surface. The first chamber was a records room. Rows of metal filing cabinets, some collapsed, others still sealed. Tape reels, DeGost terminals, sealed crates labeled Property of U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command. I started taking photographs and bagging documents while Olivia and Bethany checked for structural damage. It was quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't until we reached the second chamber that things turned. The second room was a lab. That much was clear. Stainless steel tables, wall-mounted microscopes, rows of vacuum-sealed containers, broken glass vials, and a floor drain ringed in dark red rust. Along the far wall was a containment unit, thick acrylic sealed by a negative pressure airlock. Inside it was a humanoid figure. We all froze. I remember Olivia saying, "Is that a mannequin?" But even then I could tell it wasn't. The thing inside wore a shredded Tyvek biosuit from the 1970s, olive drab instead of white. Its face was mostly obscured by a cracked respirator. Skin like wax, mouth slightly open, showing dark, cracked lips, and its eyes. Its eyes were open. Felix said it had to be some kind of preserved cadaver, maybe a test subject. I wasn't so sure. Its skin didn't look embalmed. There was no sign of mummification, just decay that looked paused. There were notes on the wall behind the containment unit, hastily scrawled with grease pencil. Locked from inside, do not breach. Virus mutated, stay out. Joel took one look and said, "Guys, what if this place was never supposed to be opened?" Olivia examined the control panel beside the containment unit. It was analog, with blinking lights, switches for airflow, and a cassette-based recorder with a label that read, "Log Day 41. We played the tape. The voice on it was male, hoarse, tired. Day 41. Dr. Adrian Mallory speaking. Vault containment intact. Subject Delta 3 remains stable. Respiration ceased at day 4, but necrotic activity continues. Viral strain Omega 9b shows adaptive behavior. Reanimates after cellular death. Attempts to terminate subject unsuccessful. Autonomic function appears independent from brain activity. All external comms severed. I have locked us in. I repeat, I have locked us in." We all went silent. Reanimates after death? That had to be a metaphor, or paranoid delusion from isolation. Bethany radioed DOE command. No response. Not surprising, signal doesn't penetrate well down here. We had a line booster set up back at the entrance, but the vault walls were nearly a meter thick in places. Olivia decided we'd take photos, collect physical samples, and then reseal the chamber. No breach, no contact, no movement of biological materials. I photographed every angle of the containment unit, zooming in on the figure's face. When my flash went off, I thought I saw the eyes twitch, but I told myself it was dust. It wasn't. That night, we slept in the surface barracks just outside Mercury. I couldn't stop thinking about what Mallory said. Reanimates after cellular death. The virus in that vault wasn't just old, it was evolving, and whatever they'd locked inside, they knew it couldn't be allowed out. But something had changed. We'd broken the seal. The vault had been airtight since 1976. When we opened it, air flowed. Systems rebooted. Maybe that backup generator charged more than the lights. At 2:17 a.m., the alarms went off. Felix was the first to respond. He ran barefoot down the corridor, still in a t-shirt, Geiger counter swinging from his wrist. I followed, fumbling with my flashlight. The alarm was from the containment vault motion sensor. Something was moving. The vault corridor was darker than before. Emergency lighting flickered, casting long shadows over the concrete. Our breath echoed. I could hear the static rasp of Bethany's radio trying to reach the surface repeater, but it was just white noise now. The generator down in the vault had likely disrupted our boost signal. That, or something else, was interfering. When we reached the glass of the observation bay, every rational explanation slipped from my mind. The figure, whatever had been inside the containment unit, was gone. The biosuit lay crumpled on the floor in a heap of tattered fabric and dried red-brown residue. The acrylic glass was smeared with what looked like condensation from inside, but it wasn't moisture. It had a viscous, almost gelatinous quality, sticking in streaks that glistened under the emergency strobes. And there were marks, smears that looked like handprints, but not from gloves. Fingers. Bare. One of them had left claw-like scratches down the inner pane. Felix leaned close, raising his Geiger counter. It clicked at background levels, no spike. Then he turned the dial to check for beta emitters. Nothing. No isotopic leakage. Whatever had breached the containment hadn't set off any radiation markers. That's when we noticed the airlock panel blinking red. The containment chamber was supposed to be isolated, double door sealed with negative pressure, and we had specifically disabled the outer override, but the lights on the panel showed the sequence had been manually engaged. Inner door, open. Outer door, open, locked from the inside. It didn't make sense. There were no accessible controls within the chamber. Olivia's logs showed the airlock panel needed dual authentication from the vault side console. Yet something, or someone, had triggered the unlock cycle less than 20 minutes earlier. Joel confirmed it with the system logs. We radioed the rest of the team to fall back to the upper corridor, but Bethany was already on her way down, sidearm drawn, tactical flashlight on. She took one look at the smeared glass and ordered everyone to initiate emergency retreat protocol. That meant sealing the lab doors, pulling back to the surface, and calling in higher command for containment support. We never got that far. Felix was the first to see it, on the ceiling. He turned, eyes wide, pointing just above the vault entrance where a rusted ventilation grate hung askew. At first, it looked like a shadow, just a trick of the light. But then it moved, slow and unnatural, limbs folding wrong. Something pulled itself through the ductwork with silent determination. No sound, no snarl, just the scrape of skin on metal. The flashlight beam hit it full. It was humanoid, still wearing pieces of the decomposing biosuit but hunched, twisted. The head tilted at an impossible angle, jaw slack, lips torn away. The skin had a waxy, translucent texture, showing dark veins underneath like oil suspended in jelly. One of its eyes had collapsed inward, the other fixed on us with a glassy stare, unblinking. It didn't look conscious, it looked driven. Bethany fired twice. The shots echoed through the vault like thunder. The first bullet hit the vent frame, sparking off steel. The second struck the thing's shoulder and spun it halfway around. But it didn't scream. It didn't bleed. It simply fell from the duct and landed hard on all fours, limbs jerking like a marionette as it scrambled behind a support beam and vanished into the shadows. The next 30 seconds were chaos. Bethany shouted for a fallback. Felix slammed the steel door panel, initiating the vault seal sequence. I could hear Olivia screaming for Derek and Joel over the radio. Marcus shouted from the upper corridor that the override wasn't working. Whatever that thing was, it had gotten into the system. Lights were flickering. The oxygen scrubbers kicked off, then back on. We'd lost control of the environmentals. Back at the main stairwell, the Raytheon engineers had begun sealing the blast door using the manual crank. Marcus ordered me to pull the logs from the motion system and get upstairs. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave Felix and Bethany behind, but Olivia shoved a backup hard drive into my hand and told me, "Get that to the surface. If we don't make it, people have to know what was down here." I ran, up the narrow, curved stairwell, lungs burning from the recycled air and dust. I passed Derek halfway up. He was hauling a Pelican case with a soil core sampler and one of the lid-lined document boxes we'd recovered from the first chamber. We made it to the upper level just as the backup lights flickered again. I turned to look back and saw something else. Another figure in the hallway, not the thing from the vent. This one wore a lab coat, long decomposed. Its mouth was open, jaw hanging low, a thick red-black fluid leaking from its nostrils. One eye was ruptured, but its body moved with horrifying coordination, arms swinging with intent. It stepped into the corridor as if it remembered how. I slammed the upper bulkhead just as it lunged. Its fingers scraped the steel for a second before the locking pins clamped shut. The whole door frame shuddered. Marcus, Joel, and I began welding the access panel. We didn't have full power, so we used a field plasma cutter from the truck kit. I could still hear Bethany and Felix on the radio. Short bursts of gunfire, static, her shouting coordinates for fallback. Then Felix coughed hard. Wet, gurgling. Olivia's voice broke over the line a few seconds later, whispering something about necrotic lung function. Then silence. We finished sealing the vault. 3 hours later, the sun came up. We stood outside the Mercury compound, breathing the cool desert air like it was the first clean breath we'd had in days. The radio still wouldn't connect to the main DOE relay tower. We tried a sat phone, but the dish alignment was skewed, likely jostled when we first powered up the vault systems. So we fell back to the surface station at Yucca Ridge, about 2 miles east, where we knew a hardline phone still worked. Marcus made the call. DOE Command told us to stay put. They were dispatching a containment unit from Nellis AFB, ETA 6 hours. Until then, we were to maintain perimeter and wait for decontamination support. Only 3 of us had made it to the surface: myself, Marcus Taggart, and Joel Brenner. Everyone else had either been lost inside or gone silent. We didn't know how many were dead or how many were walking. By the time the containment unit arrived, something had changed again. We saw the first signs just after noon. Buzzards circling over Mercury. Then one of the surface garage doors slammed open from the inside. We hadn't touched that structure. It had been sealed for decades. It was the northern garage, an old vehicle maintenance bay partially buried by windblown sand. We'd passed it on arrival, noting its rusted exterior and the collapsed utility scaffolding nearby. The rolling steel door, though warped and dented, had been tightly shut. No power to it, no mechanism to lift it, yet there it was, cracked open at the bottom, lifting with a screech of strained metal. Something was pushing from within. Marcus raised his binoculars and went stiff. I didn't need magnification to see the silhouette, jerking, lurching, uneven. Then another figure appeared beside it, and another. 3, 4, 5. Joel stood to my left, silent, clutching the aluminum case he hadn't let go of since the vault. We backed toward the parked command trailer near the sand berm, eyes fixed on the opening door. The wind picked up, dry and gritty, blowing dust across the lot. When the garage door fully rose, we saw them clearly. They were human, or had been. Vault suits, lab coveralls, half-rotted uniforms from the 1970s. Faces ruined by time and exposure. Skin gray, veined with something blackened and arterial, like veins full of oil. They moved with a stiff gait, but not randomly. They were scanning, searching. Eyes sunken but open. Their mouths moved like they were trying to breathe. Then one of them turned and looked straight at us across the 100-yard stretch of cracked tarmac. That was when Marcus said we had to go. We climbed into the sole remaining Humvee, the others having been left behind when the rest of the team descended into the vault. Joel loaded the Pelican case into the back while I kicked the ignition. It roared to life, thankfully prepped the night before with a full tank and new battery. Marcus keyed the radio, calling out across the emergency frequency again, trying to reach Nellis. Nothing but dead air. We drove fast, cutting west toward the ridgeline where the hardwired DOE repeater towers still stood. From there, we hoped we could make another call for extraction. As we crested the slope, I looked back. The garage had fully opened. At least a dozen of them had emerged. Some wore faded military fatigues. M81 woodland camo, shredded and blackened by time. One dragged a twisted leg behind it. Another had its jaw half missing, swinging loose on sinew. They didn't run, but they didn't hesitate either. They moved steadily across the lot, making for our last known position. One of them stopped at the sealed vault entrance and pressed both hands to the steel, like it remembered the shape of the door. Joel was breathing hard in the back seat, whispering something over and over. They were locked in. They weren't dead. They were just waiting. We reached the tower and set up a direct line to the Ridge Control Station near Amargosa Valley. Marcus patched in a broadband call through a legacy fiber uplink, bypassing the fried satellite system. 10 minutes later, we were on a secure line with DOE Incident Command at Nellis Air Force Base. I could hear the skepticism in the operator's voice until Marcus read the breach code off the vault's original activation panel, Omega 9 Bravo. That changed everything. They told us to hold position. C-130 was already en route with a CDC containment team, ETA under 2 hours. They wanted details. How many subjects, behavior, contagion risk? Marcus gave clinical answers: limited host emergence, observed motor function, probable pathogen activity, but his voice was tight. He wasn't a biologist, none of us were. The only person who might have understood what was unfolding was Olivia, and she hadn't made it out. While we waited, we monitored movement back at Mercury using the drone uplink. Joel had launched a Quadrator reconnaissance unit earlier that morning, and its live feed still streamed to his laptop. The image was low resolution, but clear enough. The garage was now surrounded. Dozens more had come out, not just from the northern bay, but from the adjacent underground access hatches and ventilation grates. They were crawling out like ants. Some moved fast, too fast. One vaulted a railing with inhuman precision, hit the ground on all fours, then ran upright toward the garage. Whatever had happened down there had changed them. This wasn't simple necrosis. This was engineered. A design, not decay. Then we saw something else. Down in the concrete basin near the old hydrogen storage silos, a figure stood upright, not shambling or twitching. Still, it wore a clean lab coat, white, unwrinkled, not yellowed by time. It held a clipboard. Its hair was gray and neatly combed. It looked aware. It turned slowly and stared directly into the drone's camera. Its mouth moved. Joel froze the frame, zoomed in. The lips formed 2 words: "Help me." Then the feed cut out. Static. Drone offline. That's when I knew this wasn't just a viral outbreak. There was still someone alive down there. Or something that wanted us to believe it was. Maybe one of the original scientists. Maybe something that used to be human and still remembered how to fake it. We waited another hour. Then the C-130 arrived. It came low from the southeast, banking hard and deploying a dust trail that rolled across the desert floor like a sandstorm. It landed rough, tires screeching against the cracked airstrip, then taxied toward the hardened shelter where we'd marked our position with a flare. The containment team disembarked fast. 8 men and women in full CBRN suits with CDC and USAF markings, carrying sealed black cases and portable decon modules. They asked no questions. We were scanned, isolated, and processed in under 10 minutes. Then the lead officer, a tall woman with a thick Virginia accent and an officer's bearing, asked us to show them the vault. We refused to take them to the vault itself. Instead, we gave them coordinates, schematics, and a physical sample Joel had collected from a containment hatch. Small flakes of desiccated organic matter, stored in triple-wrapped vials under dry ice. It was enough to get their attention. They deployed a drone first, an industrial-class rotorcraft with thermal sensors and LiDAR mapping. What it showed on infrared chilled us to the bone. There were at least 60 heat signatures inside the vault complex. 30 more on the surface, moving around the garages and labs. Many of the heat sources were cold, suggesting advanced hypothermia or metabolic shutdown, but they moved, consistently, with patterns, climbing walls, patrolling corridors, even grouping in pairs. One of the analysts said almost jokingly, "They're mapping their environment." No one laughed. Then came the order from Nellis. Containment had failed. The vault was now a threat to the larger region. Air Force Command approved immediate kinetic response. Thermal sterilization of the Mercury complex via precision munitions. A pair of F-15Es had already been scrambled from Tonopah test range. Impact in 15 minutes. We were moved to the C-130 and strapped in. As the engines roared to life, I watched through the window as the desert horizon grew hazy. The sun was low. The garage at Mercury still stood open. Several figures milled about outside it, some hunched, some crawling, others still. Then the missiles struck. 4 precision-guided bunker busters hit in sequence. 2 on the main compound, 2 on the vault coordinates. The ground convulsed. The sky turned black with smoke and sand. The wave of heat slapped the C-130's fuselage like a hammer. We lifted off seconds later, the runway shaking below us. The inside of the aircraft was hot and loud, rattling from turbulence and the last shock waves of the impact. The containment team was stone-faced, strapped in their seats with hands gripping restraints and boots planted tight. Joel sat next to me, still clutching the Pelican case between his knees, knuckles pale. Across from us, Marcus looked like he hadn't blinked since we'd taken off. His shirt was soaked through. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his eyes were dry, wide open and fixed on nothing. The burn of what we'd seen hadn't left his face. We climbed quickly, banking northeast toward Nellis Air Force Base. The radio chatter was heavy, encrypted channels, cross-agency relays, orders firing back and forth between DOE, CDC, Northcom. From what I could pick up through the onboard comms, Mercury wasn't being treated like an isolated event anymore. Something in the drone telemetry, or maybe the recovered data we handed over, had set off a full-scale biohazard response. Level 5. Not just containment, suppression, redirection. Public risk mitigation. Words that didn't sound like they were meant for civilians to hear. They debriefed us the moment we landed. We were hustled off the tarmac into a secure underground facility, a concrete bunker hidden beneath the operations wing of Nellis, known as Site 3C. No windows, no clocks, no phones. It was the kind of place that wasn't on official maps and didn't appear in any public index. A decontamination team stripped us down, ran full-body scans, blood work, and biohazard surface swipes. It took nearly 4 hours. None of us tested positive for exposure, but they kept us isolated anyway. I was assigned to a secure room with a cot, a desk, a laptop without internet access, and a notebook labeled "Do Not Remove." I spent the first hour writing down everything I could remember. Dates, timestamps, names of personnel, control panel readings, log codes. I didn't want to forget anything, but part of me already wished I could. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the part about the figure in the lab coat, the one who looked straight into the drone camera and mouthed, "Help me." I wrote it down twice, just to see it again in ink. I didn't know what scared me more, that he'd spoken those words, or that he'd known where the drone was. A few hours later, they called me into a secure conference room. There were 5 people inside. Only one introduced himself, Dr. Everett Vale, a civilian biothreat analyst from DARPA. The others were military, one in full USAF dress blues, two in muted black suits with no insignia, and a woman with a CDC badge clipped to her vest who never said a word. Dr. Vale asked about the vault. Not the virus, not the breach, just the vault. When it had been built, what I knew about its contents, how I accessed the sealed documents. I told him everything, down to the tape reels and grease pencil writing on the containment chamber walls. He nodded without interrupting, like none of it surprised him. Then he laid out the real history. Project Cyclone wasn't a time capsule. It was a containment protocol developed in 1974 under the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, part of a post-Vietnam initiative into asymmetric biowarfare threats. The virus, referred to internally as Omega-9b, had never been officially recorded. It was a classified anomaly, believed to be a Russian-origin pathogen modified through recombinant DNA experimentation and reverse-engineered after a series of captured Soviet research materials came into American hands through an undisclosed exchange. The virus was unique in one key way. It operated on dead tissue. Not just reactivating cells, but hijacking them, rewriting proteins, re-establishing degraded synapses, replacing core metabolic functions with anaerobic, chemically unstable alternatives. The result was not life, not undeath, something else, a transitional state, intelligence without self-awareness, movement without survival instinct. It replicated, slowly but persistently, using trace biological material in the host. Air wasn't needed. Nerve function wasn't necessary. As long as there was muscle fiber and a functioning brainstem, it could continue. By 1976, after several fatal incidents in underground test sites, the decision was made to contain the last viable strain beneath Mercury. All involved personnel were sealed inside. No extraction. No contact. The vault was built to hold for 300 years. We were the ones who opened it in year 49. They told me the site had been destroyed. The strike incinerated the vault, vaporized the upper compound, and collapsed all access tunnels. Nothing survived. But they were wrong. 2 days later, something triggered a bio-alarm in Beatty, Nevada, a small town about 70 miles from Mercury. A morgue technician went missing. The coroner who found him said he was halfway through a routine autopsy when the body sat up and bit through the technician's wrist. Local authorities dismissed it as drug-induced delirium. The CDC team sent in quietly found 5 more infections in less than 24 hours. The virus had made it out. We don't know how. Maybe one of the infected breached during the initial containment breach. Maybe an avian carrier, maybe dust, sediment, or one of us had tracked something out without knowing. It didn't matter. It was there now, and it wasn't dormant. Within a week, smaller incidents were reported in Tonopah, then Elko, all brushed off as unrelated. But I saw the internal memos, scans of internal field reports marked, "Do not distribute." People were found days after death, walking, disoriented, violent. No body heat, no respiration. One was recorded walking 14 miles across the high desert before collapsing from structural limb failure. Muscle detachment, not exhaustion. Joel disappeared on the 6th day. His hotel room in Las Vegas was found ransacked, the Pelican case missing. No sign of forced entry. No blood. Just the hard drive from our data log, ripped out of his laptop and left on the floor. His room key was later used at a freight depot in Barstow, California, 3 days later. Whoever used it wasn't Joel. His face showed up on a security cam, but the timestamps made no sense. It showed him standing motionless for nearly 4 minutes, staring into a service camera before walking away without his bag. He didn't blink once. Marcus and I stayed in contact, though under surveillance. They assigned him to a decon team in Fallon, part of the mobile quarantine units. I received clearance to digitize the vault's recovered logs, what little we saved, into a classified archive tagged for internal review. But none of that mattered now. By the 10th day, the virus had spread beyond Nevada. A long-haul trucker from Sparks was found dead in Flagstaff. His rig carried sealed crates from a logistics subcontractor that had been operating near the Mercury cleanup site. By the time they realized the connection, 3 warehouse workers in Albuquerque had gone missing. Their phones were active, still pinging local towers. One of them texted a friend an hour after their recorded time of death. I haven't left the facility since. They've moved me twice. First to Cheyenne Mountain, then to a secondary site I can't name. Every time I close my eyes, I see that thing in the lab coat. The one who looked into the drone, the one who said, "Help me." I don't think it was a man anymore. I think it was the virus itself testing us, speaking through one of its own, showing us it can learn, that it remembers. They shouldn't have opened the vault, but now that it's out, we're not dealing with a biological agent. We're dealing with memory, something that never forgot what was done to it, something that was buried not just to contain its threat but to forget its origin. And we woke it up. If you're hearing this, stay away from Mercury. Don't trust the air. Don't trust the dead. And if they look at you like they recognize you, run. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.